but we don't know what an election would bring, and while polls today suggest that we would get more of the same or a flip with the Liberal minority, which I would suggest would be quite a change in the capacity of the House of Commons possibly to work, or certainly along different angles. We don't know that. If we'd gone from pre-election polls in the past, Paul Martin would still be Prime Minister and Stephen Harper would be retired. That is what pre-election polls suggested, and Jean Chrétien would never have been Prime Minister. Kim Campbell was the best, the most popular Prime Minister in history, 2 months before she brought her party down to 2 seats. But I guess part of the feeling is that these players don't seem to be able to make Parliament work in the current configuration, and the tape of the Prime Minister who says, you know, he wouldn't be caught dead working with separatists and socialists, basically mean that if he's re-elected with the same hand, we're going to be back to square one.
Okay, well, you've brought up the tape, so why don't we look at an excerpt of it. Terry Malewski brought us this last night, and it has been the topic of some conversation throughout the last 24 hours. Here's a 30-second chunk of it where the Stephen Harper talking to Conservatives last week in what was not supposed to be a public speech but has become very public. Let's listen in and figure out what we should make of it. Here it is.
Do not be fooled for a moment. If we do not get a majority, the Liberals, the NDP, and the Bloc Québécois will combine and they will form a government. They will deny this till they're blue in the face in an election campaign, but I guarantee it, if we do not win a majority, this country will have a Liberal government propped up by the socialists and the separatists.
Well, Michael Ignatieff was saying today that's the real Stephen Harper. That's the Harper that Canadians don't usually see. Tom Flanagan, Harper's former advisor, was saying today that, in fact, yeah, that is the real Stephen Harper, and come on, bring it on. Let's see more of him like that. What should we make of this tape? Alan?
Well, much has been made because it's secret that Stephen Harper really didn't want to say this. I don't think this is all that off strategy for a number of reasons. I mean, first, you know, the conventional wisdom is that the Conservatives lost the 2004 election because they uttered the M word. But that was 5 years ago, and that is much, much harder for the opposition to marshal the case that these guys have got a hidden agenda. While people might not have tremendous affection, that they believe that, you know, that Stephen Harper has the tools to have the job. So he's not as scary as he was before. Secondly, I mean, what we saw in earlier this year is that Harper made tremendous hay with the coalition boogeyman, and I think he's test running that again. And thirdly, we've seen the appetite and the support for minority government start to slip lately, as people are starting to wonder if majority government is really such a bad thing. So I wouldn't be surprised if what is right now private isn't public in a couple of weeks.
But if you're trying to build a majority, you usually need at least something in Quebec. And Chantal, are those words still a problem for Stephen Harper in Quebec?
Peter, I was waiting in a waiting room full of people around lunchtime, and this tape played on French television. And I looked at the people's faces in that room, and I thought, if the Conservatives really want to have no seats in Quebec and think they can win the 12 seats they're missing to a majority and then make up for 6 to 10 Quebec seats to get there on the basis of anti-separatist rhetoric, they're welcome to try. But the last time Stephen Harper went away with this rhetoric, he certainly saved this government, fine, but he will not be adding it up to a majority unless he can so demonstrate and so mobilize Canadians outside Quebec that he becomes the first Prime Minister who actually crafts the governing majority without some significant support in Quebec.
Andrew?
I don't think Harper is so deluded as to think he can win a majority, not this election. I think this is a convenient rhetorical stick for him, but I don't think he thinks he can actually get it. I actually wouldn't be surprised if that video was leaked by the Tories deliberately, because he both gets to test run the majority meme, and secondly gets to get us all talking about this coalition bogeyman. And both things, I think, redound to his benefit for the reasons that Alan stated. I was at a dinner with some Liberals the other night, and the complaint was that Harper's just not scary enough. So if the question is, what are you more scared of, a Tory majority or a Liberal NDP Bloc coalition, I think the calculation is that more people would say the latter than the former, and they're probably right.
Well, just to make a point on the tape, if it was leaked by the Conservatives. It was a pretty Machiavellian way of doing it because it was the Liberals who passed it on to the media last night. So it took quite a potential route there.
And I think it was welcomed by the Liberals in the sense that at this point, Michael Ignatieff is under attack for having no reason to not keep Parliament going, and the line was a fair line, saying, well, you know, this is what I'm dealing with, a guy who really doesn't want to work with us, so you get my point here. So from that angle, I fail to see how smart it would have been to leak it, and I would argue that there are loads of people who also are not convinced that they want a Conservative majority at this point.